Hello everyone, Grandpa Ron here again. Hope you're all having a great day. Today we're going to get back into our very basic Bible study with Genesis chapter 45. Remember last time Joseph had set up a test for his brothers because they had come to Egypt to buy food yet a second time, and he had put his cup in the sack of the youngest brother. It was all a setup, and he had his men go out and search them and bring them back once they found the cup. Of course, they were very afraid. But in doing this, he was able to determine that there was a big change of heart, especially in Judah, because Judah, remember, offered himself up to be a slave instead of his youngest brother. And he was concerned for his brothers and his father. And so Joseph could see this change of heart. Instead of the callous person that had plotted to first kill him and then later changed to sell him to the caravan, and he wound up coming to Egypt as a slave. Rather than that callous person, you see somebody caring, somebody that's grown. And so Joseph now is going to actually reveal himself to his brothers. So let's look at chapter 45. Genesis chapter 45. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried, "Have everyone go out for me." So there was no man with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard of it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph had concealed his identity very well. He looked like an Egyptian. He was groomed like an Egyptian. He probably dressed like a wealthy Egyptian. And so the brothers, and of course a lot of years had passed, so the brothers did not recognize him. He had picked up the Egyptian language, and we know that they used interpreters for part of his interaction with the brothers. And so they're just stunned and dismayed, because in their hearts and minds they actually believed he must be dead. But he's revealed himself. What a great emotional release this must have been to Joseph. He probably wanted to reveal himself earlier, but now that he knew their hearts were softened, he felt like this was the appropriate time. Verse 4. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come closer to me." And they came closer. And he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Wow. What a forgiving spirit, and what a spirit trusting in God all these years, never forsaking the Lord of his father, and trusting that this was in God's will. And so he reveals that to his brothers. Verse 6, "For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth, and to keep you alive by a great deliverance." So he's giving God this credit. But see, even in Joseph's mind, he believes God is delivering them just from the famine. But as we're going to see later, God's plan is much bigger than that. God wanted to get Israel, that's Jacob, changed his name to Israel, get Israel out of Canaan. I remember Jacob's father had gone to great extent to make sure he did not marry anyone from Canaan. God wanted to keep this line of this people separate, a people that he could use for his honor and his glory, and would shed light on his will and character. And God wanted to keep this line as pure as possible. So he wanted to get them out of Canaan so that they would not marry Canaanites. And how did he do that? He created the famine, and Joseph is correct. He sent him there and made him second in command in Egypt, and now he's going to ask that his father be brought with all his household to Egypt. Not just to save them from the famine, but to get them out of Canaan. We'll talk about that a little more in a few minutes. Verse 8, now therefore it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Again, he's saying it wasn't you, it was God that did this. It doesn't mean that they're not accountable. It doesn't mean that they did something that was right, because in their heart they were doing something that was wrong. But he's telling them now that their hearts are softened, now that they're more open to see what God is doing, he's revealing this to them. God brought me here. Don't you feel guilty? Which they already have kind of repented in previous chapters, remember? They admitted that we were wrong and God has caught up with us. And so it's an interesting inner working here. Man's responsibility, but God is sovereign. Okay. Verse 9. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. And you shall live in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me. You and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have. Come down, come down, come down to me. They're going to live in the land of Goshen. We're going to see that word again. This is a prime piece of the country, possibly the best area in the country. So they're going to be brought out of Canaan so they won't be corrupted. They're going to be brought to Egypt, but they're going to be in a separate section of the country so that they won't be corrupted in Egypt. And we're going to see that this is where they grow into a great nation. They're really going to multiply. The population is going to take off, and God has got some wonderful things in store for them. Verse 11, there I will also provide for you, for there are still 5 years of famine to come, lest you and your household and all that you have be impoverished. And behold, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that it is my mouth which is speaking to you. You can see this is the truth. My brothers are going to vouch for it. Verse 13, now you must tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt, and all that you have seen, and you must hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept on them, and afterward his brothers talked with him. I'm sure they had a lot to talk about. So we don't hear that, we don't see that exchange here, but you know that Joseph's going to tell them all that's happened over these many years since they sold him to that caravan. And they're going to tell him about what's been happening back in Canaan. Now when the news was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, it pleased Pharaoh and his servants. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this, load your beasts and go to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your households and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat the fat of the land." So the Pharaoh at that time is so impressed with Joseph. He's saving them from this famine through God's intervention. And he's happy that his brothers are coming down there. But remember, to the Egyptian, these herders are not very appealing. They're an abomination, so he's going to subtly keep them to the side. Verse 19, "Now you are ordered, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. And do not concern yourselves with your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours." Then the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them wagons according to the command of Pharaoh, and gave them provisions for the journey. So they're going to have kind of the royal treatment here. Pharaoh's providing wagons, he's providing food and provisions for them, which is considerable, because if he's going to bring his flocks and herds and there's no grazing material between Canaan and Egypt, they're going to require food, even for the livestock. I was just thinking that the livestock are probably fewer in number than we read about when Jacob and Esau were reunited, because the famine has probably reduced the herds quite a bit. So he won't have as many cattle to bring with him, but he'll have some. Verse 23, "To each of them he gave changes of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments." Now remember, Jacob had given Joseph special clothing, and that's what created envy with the brothers, and the brothers wanted to kill him. And now Joseph is kind of doing that in reverse. Perhaps it's another test to see if they will envy their youngest brother again, but apparently not. Verse 23, "And to his father he sent as follows, 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and sustenance for his father on the journey." They've got a lot of provisions. Verse 24, "So he sent his brothers away, and as they departed he said to them, 'Do not quarrel on the journey.'" So they can assume certain things, that he doesn't want them to bicker about whose fault what was and what could have been, should have been, Benjamin's getting more than us, or anything like that. So he's warning them, don't quarrel on the journey or entreating them, you know. Verse 25, "Then they went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob. And they told him, saying, 'Joseph is still alive, and indeed he is ruler over all the land of Egypt.' But he was stunned, for he did not believe them." Well, that's understandable, because all these years he's thought he was dead. Verse 27, "When they told him all the words of Joseph that he had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob was revived. Then Israel said, 'It is enough, my son Joseph is alive. I will go and see him before I die.'" What a tremendous encounter this must have been, full of emotion. And for Jacob to realize that his son Joseph was still alive, And I'm sure a lot of questions popped into his head. How could this happen? But it was enough for him just to know that his son was still alive. And we're going to stop here, but we're going to see in these next few chapters, as we get to the end of Genesis, that he is going to move to Egypt, and we're going to read about that. And we're going to see how God preserves the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so that they are a select and separated people, and how he's going to try to draw them closer to himself. And we're going to see this roller coaster ride continue that we've seen in the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, where they would trust God, but they would turn aside, get themselves into trouble, have to be bailed out, turn back to God, prosper, but then turn aside again. And that's not unique to them. Even in the Christian life, even after we've accepted Christ as our Savior, we still have that sin nature, and there's a constant battle. And we're going to see the nation Israel engaged in a constant battle, and a very dramatic one, and one that's going to take a lot of discipline and chastisement to ultimately get them to turn to the Lord. Anyway, we'll stop there today. I hope you'll watch the next one. In the meantime, God bless, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.